5 steps to get noticed by the UFC. That's the story for today. I get questions all the time. Myles, I'm young, I'm coming up, I want to be in that big show, I want to fight in the UFC. Keep an eye out for me. How do I get there? Do you have any tips? Well, this video is for anybody that's curious on how to get noticed by the UFC. Let's get to it. Welcome back to the channel, everybody. I'm Myles Jury, and today I want to talk about how to get noticed by the UFC. I have fought 14 plus times with the UFC. I've had big fights, main card fights, fought on ESPN, fought on Fox, pay-per-view cards, and today it's a great topic because when I was young, when I was coming up, I had the same question. I was like, dude, I want to get with the UFC. What do I need to do? What can I do to be like, hey, UFC, I'm over here. Like, give me a shot. Give me an opportunity to fight. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Maybe you're up and coming, you're a fighter, or maybe you're just a casual fan that's wondering, like, man, how do you get into the UFC? Is there like a college you go to, or is there certain steps you follow? And I actually wish when I was coming up that this video was made because it would help clarify some of those steps to actually getting noticed by the UFC. So first things first, you have to understand that nothing is given in the UFC. To be able to make it and get noticed by the UFC, it takes a lot of hard work. It takes a lot of commitment, a lot of time. It isn't like you just call them up and say, hey, I'm Joe Schmo and I want a shot in the UFC. Like maybe in fantasy land that works, but the UFC is just like the Super Bowl of mixed martial arts. It's like the NFL of football. You wouldn't just go up to the NFL and be like, hey, I just signed me right here. It takes a lot of showing, and it takes a lot of practice to actually get to that opportunity. The best way to get noticed by the UFC is to smash that like button and to subscribe. I've done it all kinds of times before, but that's definitely the #1 way to get noticed by the UFC. Step number 1 is being on a winning streak. Yeah, imagine that, right? You actually have to go out there on smaller shows like LFA, King of the Cage, and you have to fight. You have to actually, I look at it as like building a resume. The UFC loves fighters on winning streaks. 2, 3+ winning streaks is huge. I remember when I was getting on The Ultimate Fighter, that was one of the main criteria that separated who's getting on the show and who's not. They would look at everybody's record and say, oh, we like this guy, but we like this guy better because he's on a 3-fight win streak or he's on a 4-fight win streak. My record before I got on The Ultimate Fighter was 9-0. This helped me out a ton because again, the UFC and the Ultimate Fighter, they love guys on winning records. So having that 9-0 record really put me on the front of the pack compared to all the other guys. There were a lot of great fighters, but they were maybe 11-2 or 11-5 or 12-2, and they maybe lost recently. Me, on the other hand, I had that 9-0 record, and it really, really helped me. When you're on a winning streak, your chances of getting noticed by the UFC grow exponentially. Compared to guys that are maybe great fighters and can be on a level of the UFC, but they're coming off of losses, your chances of getting signed are a lot higher than theirs. So step number 1 is go out there, get on a win streak. UFC loves that. Step number 2 to get noticed by the UFC is to actually go out there and win a belt in a smaller organization. Winning a championship belt, man, UFC, they love picking up fighters. Again, guys from LFA winning a title there, King of the Cage winning a title there. There's all kinds of smaller shows, smaller promotions to actually go out there and win fights in and win a title. And when you do that, it's the best way to get noticed because UFC is always picking up champions in smaller shows. And at the end of the day, what I really like about this kind of step to getting noticed by the UFC is you can't deny talent. If you're the best, you can never be denied that. So if you have in your mind, hey, I want to be in the UFC, and I'm actually going to go out there, I'm going to beat everybody in the world that's not in the UFC until the UFC notices me, that's actually a really good mindset to have because UFC loves those type of fighters. A guy that reminds me of that is when Jake Shields got signed by the UFC. Jake Shields was actually won the Strikeforce Championship. He won the Elite XC. He won all kinds of championships outside of the UFC. And then finally he got signed and UFC picked him up because they had no other option. I mean, he was just the best there was outside of the UFC. And that's constantly what the UFC is looking for, is the best fighters in the world. So win that title in those smaller shows, and that's going to help you get noticed by the UFC. Step number 3 to get noticed by the UFC, and I see this one happen a lot, is to be ready, be in shape, and be at your weight. In the fight game, there's all kinds of things that can happen. There's injuries, there's personal issues, there's weight issues, there's drug test failures, a la John Jones when he was the main event UFC 200 against Daniel Cormier. He got popped for that PED, and they had to cancel that fight. And Anderson Silva stepped in. So there's always opportunities in this fight game that happen, boom, like that, and you would never have guessed it. So by staying at your weight, staying in shape, and being ready to pick up a fight when the UFC calls on a couple days notice, a week notice, that's huge for you. UFC loves guys that are ready to fight on the drop of a dime. They love guys when they call and say, hey, this guy fell out, we need somebody to step in. Boom, you're there, you're ready to rock, you're on weight, you're willing to fly out to wherever this fight is, you're willing to step on that scale, step in that cage that next day and put on a performance. Those are the guys the UFCs are looking for. So I would recommend, if you want to get signed to that big show, keep your weight low, stay close to fight weight, stay in shape, and just stay ready, because you never know when that opportunity will call. Step number 4 to get noticed by the UFC is to have a good connect with the UFC. This could be a manager, this could be a coach, this could be a friend. It doesn't matter who this connect is, but have somebody that's in good contact with the UFC. Somebody that the UFC loves working with. I've seen it time and time again that guys get shots in the big show just because of a team they train with, or just because of a manager they have. You know, let's face it, sometimes in life it's not what you know, it's who you know. And having a great contact with the UFC can jump you to that front of the line for that fight that pops up. The UFC loves working with fighters, coaches, managers that are easy to work with. If you're tough to deal with as a manager or a coach, the UFC hates working with that. They love people that when they call, they jump on opportunities and they're ready to fight, they're ready to go. So make sure you have that great contact with the UFC, because that leaves a door wide open for you to get that opportunity and get into the UFC. Step number 5 to getting noticed with the UFC is to have a great following. Now, this is the power of marketing and the power of social media. UFC, just like any other business, loves getting behind guys and fighters and girls that they believe is the next superstar. I mean, UFC is constantly looking for guys and girls that are the next Ronda Rousey or Conor McGregor. They're looking for those superstars. So if you can have a great following on social media platforms like Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and whatever other platform that comes out, that's going to help you jump to that front of that line. If you have a great fan following and a great connection with all your fans, UFC really notices that. They love guys that they can really get behind, and that social media and that marketing platform really, really helps get you into the UFC. So that's it. I mean, in a nutshell, you have to remember, the UFC isn't easy to get into. It's worth it, but it's not easy. I remember coming up when I was younger that I would have done anything to get that opportunity to get underneath them bright lights, to get that walk to the cage, and to be able to call myself a UFC fighter. I mean, heck, back then, I probably would have just fought for free. I really wanted to get that opportunity. I really wanted to prove myself. And I wish back then I really had a video like this to actually streamline me to actually getting into the UFC and some things that I could really go on. Because coming up sometimes as a fighter, you don't really know what to do. You know where you want to go. Like, I knew where I was headed, but I really had no way of getting there. I really had no idea of how to get there. The strategy that I used when I was coming up as a mixed martial arts fighter and wanted to make it to that big show, the Super Bowl of mixed martial arts, UFC, is I just chose to win fights, train hard, win fights, and basically let my success do the talking. I knew by going out and constantly fighting, having great performances, by going out and submitting guys, going out and by knocking guys out, by beating good guys, tough guys, that UFC would have to notice me. And I chose that I wasn't going to give up. I chose that by continually going out, continue working hard each day, training, getting better, that it was only a matter of time before UFC noticed me and I got signed. That's exactly what happened too. I got an opportunity by continually fighting and beating guys to be on the Ultimate Fighter, and by getting on there, I had a great performance, and the UFC ended up giving me an opportunity. I beat Chris Saunders on the Ultimate Fighter finale, and with that win, they were like, hey Myles, we're going to give you a contract. We're going to give you a yearly contract with the UFC. And if it wasn't for me constantly training, getting better, fighting tough guys, getting out there, putting it on the line, I would have never got that opportunity. So that was my way of getting there. Hopefully this video helps some of you guys out there that are on the up and up and really want to make it to that big show. When I get those comments and I get those messages about, hey, I really want to be in the big show, I have dreams of fighting in the UFC, it's my hope that this video actually helps you get there. Remember, it's not given. You have to take it. You have to go out. You have to work hard for it. But if you're willing to do it and you're willing to find a way, you will make it there. Until next time, guys, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe. I'm going to keep coming out with great content for you. Let me know any comments or concerns or any topics you guys would like. Drop a comment below. And until next time.